All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another one of our transitions webinars, or actually the first in our series. We'll talk a little bit more about that. I just want to say good morning to you all. Thank you for joining us from all over the state. We have two really great colleges here to present for you today. We are going to go over a few little technical things just to make sure everyone is feeling comfortable and have what they need for this webinar. So welcome to the Transitions webinar. This is part of the Guided Pathways workshops. It's Redesigning with Transitions in Mind, a Guided Pathways webinar. This was originally a Guided Pathways workshop, but given the turn of events, we've turned them into a webinar series. So you'll get to see us every other week with some new content. So thank you again for joining us all. So some technical announcements before we get started. We are using the webinar function, something new and exciting. So we're all learning. If there is any technical issues throughout, do let us know in the chat box and we will be there to support you. You are muted if you are an attendee with your videos turned off. And then if you are calling from both your phone and logged into your computer, try to sync them up if you can. And there's a little instruction right there. You have a participant ID that can help connect the two. Again, if you have questions, please do let us know in the chat, and our wonderful CLP team is there to support you. Speaking of the wonderful CLP support team, we're going to go to the next slide here, and this is your CLP transition webinar team. You might be seeing us through our problem-solving webinars on Thursdays. We have Naomi Castro, Sherry Shojai, Eder Flores, and myself, Amanda Isa. We are working both in front of the camera and behind the scenes to make sure that we are here to support throughout today's webinar. Just to kind of reorient where this webinar fits into the scheme of our work, you might be familiar with the Guided Pathways workshops that CLP hosts. We started off this school year with reimagining counseling and student services over in Fresno, and that was in September. And then we started off the new year with redesigning with careers in mind in Sacramento. And this workshop would have been in Irvine at the beginning of this month, but now we're here live through webinar, Redesigning with Transitions in Mind, a webinar. So thank you all for joining us. To give you a little overview of what these transitions are, or what we mean by when we talk about redesigning with transitions in mind, we're talking about all the many ways students come to our colleges, the different onboarding processes, the early college credit opportunities, the different ways that students are first exposed to community college. So we're going to be talking about a number of different programs and pathways into college. As we venture through this dual enrollment and transition space work, we kind of clarify things through a framework. We will be offering this as a larger PDF with a little bit more detail, but I wanted to give you all a snapshot of what we talk about when we say the dual enrollment framework. Looking through the work around the state in dual enrollment and working closely with colleges, we kind of feel like we've created this kind of umbrella of a sort to sort through the different aspects of dual enrollment. We have connections, which are the networking, the relationship building, who you work with, is it industry or K-12, things of the sort. We have intentional design, which really digs deep into why are we doing it this way? What is our priority area? Where do we start? How do we scale? It's all the different aspects of design. And then our last piece is sustainability. How do we ensure this lives on past a specific funding, lives on past a specific person? How can we ensure that this becomes scalable and accessible to all and long lasting? So we will be offering this as a PDF again in our follow-up email, and it might even pop up in the chat. So we'll see. So for the webinar series, so not just today, we're kind of giving you some learning outcomes throughout our series. We'll be doing three kind of different things. We'll be discovering promising examples of how California community colleges are building partnerships and creating intersegmental connections. So that's kind of that first layer of the framework. We'll also be learning how colleges are intentionally designing transitions to strengthen student supports and achieve equity. And then lastly, we'll be exploring practices and structures that colleges have created to ensure sustainability of this work on their campuses and with partners. So those are our overarching goals for our series, and we look forward to you being along with us for the ride. So for today, we have two amazing colleges here to share a little bit about their work. We will be hearing from Bakersfield College, early college, entering the path in 9th grade, and from Cte College, the virtual campus, retaining a sense of belonging amidst COVID-19 transitions. Yes, so without further ado, oh, my bad. One more thing before we continue. As the chat can get really exciting and lively and we want to say hi to everyone, we do use our chat function for the Q&A. And so what we'd like for you to do is if you have a question for our presenters, please do let us know in the chat. One way to do that is to identify the college that you are asking. So for example, if you have a question for a panelist, you could say, hey, Bakersfield, how did you do this? Or Chafee, that sounds interesting, could you tell us more? Let us know, and so then during the Q&A section following their presentation, we'll be able to answer those questions. If you have a general question that doesn't really pertain to one or the other presenter, just say general and your question. And lastly, again, if you have any tech issues, please do let us know in the chat. Our team is working to make sure that they are there to support you. Okay, so I think with that, now we are ready to hand it on over to our team from Bakersfield, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So Bakersfield, please take it away.
So
we'll just make you.
Oh, thank you. So I am Nicole Alvarez. I am the program manager for the early college program at Bakersfield College. Today, you're going to be hearing from one of our early college counselors, Ms. Cynthia Zamora, a faculty member from one of our early college dual enrollment partner high schools, Mr. Christopher Pelletier from McFarland High School Early College. And you're going to be hearing from a student at the same high school, McFarland High School Early College, Mr. Joshua Ariza. So we're very excited to be presenting today and to share some of our insight with you. So my first slide is a short video from our college president, Dr. Sonia Christian, and she shares some insight on guided pathways, how that came about, and equity. So let's go ahead and play that video.
The genesis of dual enrollment at Bakersfield College was the idea that we needed to bring college to our rural high schools in particular, because the data had indicated that those students didn't go to college. And so we wanted to bring college to them. And once the campus sees it, those who were sort of skeptics recognize, oh my goodness, why were we doing it? Because we were able to show results right away. Where dual enrollment has grown now over the last 4 years is not just as something nice to have, but dual enrollment now is a mandatory part of our structure to onboard students to college. So we have moved from dual enrollment to early college pathways. So now what is happening at 48 high schools that feed to Bakersfield College is every student who's coming into the 9th grade, we start thinking about a student ed plan, a college plan for the student. Dual enrollment is just the extension of guided pathways to the 9th grade. So rather than waiting for students to come to BC and then trying to provide that clarity and implement that entire framework, we are starting to implement that framework right in the 9th grade in partnership with the high schools. So that whole work with dual enrollment is really guided pathways, expanding beyond Bakersfield College with a 9 through 16 frame of mind. We have done it, and it is doable. It's not about being perfect, but it is taking that leap of faith in the first year, having something done, knowing you can come back every year and improve on it.
So before I review some of the takeaways that you will have from our presentation, I want to introduce two more team members that we have today who are going to be in the chat box, available to answer questions that you may have. And those two team members are, number one, our Director of Student Success and Equity, Leslie Bonds, and our early college professional expert, Ms. Kylie Swanson. So this slide just kind of goes over some of the takeaways that you will have from our presentation today. You can review that and we can just kind of go on to the next slide. All right. So Bakersfield College, this is a snapshot of the area and students that we service. We service a 5,000 square mile area. We have just under 37,000 students, 80% of which are first generation college students and 67% are Latinx. We also have 7,600, almost 7,700 dual enrollment students that we service in our early college program. So we can go on to the next slide. So this slide describes early college going from, oh, oops, can we go back to the previous slide? There we go. It does not want me to talk about that slide. So this is showing our early college program going from early college 1.0 to early college 2.0. When we first began dual enrollment at Bakersfield College, we started with a list of instructors from our high school partners who met the minimum qualifications, and we just offered any and all classes that we could. Because we wanted to get it off the ground and we wanted to get going. So this resulted in what we refer to as random acts of dual enrollment. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. With the continued growth in section count and participation, we transitioned from the random acts of dual enrollment to intentional design that would take our course offerings and bundle them into pathway entry points for high school students. If you look at the 2015-2016 year, you can see that's when we started to experience a significant bump in our sections and in our enrollment. That increase can be attributed to two things. The first thing is that we applied with AACC for guided pathways, and the second is that our rural initiatives team was developed in 2015, and that really showcased how much the students in rural communities wanted us to come to them. And it also showcased how we were able to create equity and merge guided pathways in to create student success. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Oh, and also on this slide, really quick before, it's important to note with what's going on right now with COVID-19, we did lose 40 dual enrollment sections recently due to the inability to successfully meet the learning targets in an online format. So those sections that we lost are going to be classes like welding that you can't really teach online. So, okay, let's move to the next slide. So our guided pathways in our dual enrollment program take the pathway to degree completion from this congested Thomas guide model of a map that nobody would be able to read or understand, to a more simplified format like the Google map that you see on the right-hand side. So the path is clearly identified. You can see point A to point B. You can see how long it's going to take you. It's just a clear, concise way. And you do see that there are going to be some obstacles. So that's when alternate routes are provided. By increasing our course offerings on the high school campuses, we are bringing the entrance to the path geographically closer to the students and eliminating the barrier of transportation. By strategically offering transferable courses and pathways like those in BC and Cal State Bakersfield Finish in 4 collaboration, we are creating a seamless transition for students as they transfer from high school to community college to university, or straight from a high school to a university. In the chat box, Leslie and Kylie will provide the link to our Finish in 4 webpage. So you can see kind of some of the initiatives that we're rolling out to help get them to that degree completion. This also showcases the building with an intentional clear path to degree completion. Our college president likes to use the term relentless clarity when she refers to guided pathways. This shows that we are going to continue to keep that clarified path for them, and we are going to be relentless in our efforts to help them get from degree start to, or entering the path to degree completion. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So this slide shows the marriage between the guided pathways and dual enrollments to form early college. By joining the success of dual enrollment with the framework of guided pathways, early college opens students' minds earlier and gives them the opportunity to explore college and career pathways without the harms of wasted time or wasted finances. By implementing guided pathways as early as the 9th grade, we are teaching high school students how to make informed decisions about their future, and we are setting them up with the skills that they need to get to degree completion. Also in the chat box, Kylie and Leslie will provide a list of our courses and pathways, or a link to our website that has a full list of our courses and our pathways. But really what this slide is showcasing too is that early college is an umbrella term for intentionally packaging our dual enrollment courses into pathways. We follow the Career Ladders Project framework, intentional design. So let's go to the next slide. Lastly, this slide kind of showcases all of the intricacies and the pieces to the puzzle that form early college. Students enter the path in 9th grade with a dual enrollment course that's offered on their high school campus, and it follows the Get Focused, Stay Focused curriculum. As students forge their path, they have access to continued college courses in various formats, from more courses on their high school campus to courses that they can attend at the college to online courses that they can access from anywhere. Early college teaches students what they need to do in order to complete a pathway and provides them with several opportunities to get a head start in doing so. This year, we were able to add additional support services for students taking advantage of the early college opportunities. We were able to hire 2 counselors for our early college program that specifically focus on early college and assisting our students with identifying the pathway that they want to enter and assisting them in their process of staying on the path. So next, I will turn it over to one of our early college counselors who specifically handles McFarland High School Early College. Her name is Cynthia Zamora, and she's here to explain her role as an early college counselor.
Good morning. If we can go to the next slide, please. My name is Cynthia Zamora, as Nicole already mentioned, and I am an early college counselor at BC. So my role as an early college counselor specifically is to provide support to the high school students that are enrolled in our early college program. And that includes our dual classes and concurrent classes that we offer for students. And so in my role, I manage the enrollment of the students, assisting them with the difficulty, the confusion that they can come across when it comes to getting enrolled and beginning the process of early college. So I work very closely with our high school partners, high school staff, to get the support that these students need for enrollment. Once students are enrolled, I also assist them with the program selection. So we're talking about working with high school students who are needing to choose a pathway. What are they interested in? Where do they want to go with their life? And so I want to ensure that the students are choosing the classes that, outline their goals so that they are successful. And in addition to that success, I provide intervention services for students so that we can help the retention of these students and again, forge their way to successful completion of their pathway. So on the next slide, I will describe how I provide those services on a more one-on-one status. So at the high schools, I provide group and one-on-one counseling to our early college students. So these counseling sessions can go anywhere from intervention counseling, where I'm meeting with students to talk about their grades, how are they doing, how do they feel supported, do I need to link them to resources on our campus so that they can continue to be successful. And again, as already mentioned, the pathway selection. So I also maintained open communication with early college instructors, one of who you will hear from shortly, and the high school counselors regarding student progress. And so keeping in line with that, again, providing support, I go to the high schools on a weekly status to visit with the students, to host presentations, and making sure that students are getting all of the resources necessary. On the next slide, you will see here that COVID-19 really impacted the way I support students. So we went from a high school on face-to-face type of learning environment to now a remote learning environment. And Bakersfield College also went into a remote counseling environment. So my dilemma was, how do I continue to support students and staff remotely to continue to ensure that students successfully enroll and complete their pathways? And most importantly, provide that retention service to our students. So moving from in-person to remote, I decided to implement a few things to help support our students. So if we can go to the next slide, you will see here that what I had to do was develop methods for high school students that are familiar to them. Within the high schools, a lot of the services that counselors and teachers provide is a resource called Remind 101. So we created a Remind 101 for our students, where I can directly send out mass messages to students, especially now with enrollment for summer and fall term at Bakersfield College. I want to make sure students are up to date with what to do and making sure that they're getting the required information needed. In addition, I started providing weekly Zoom office hours. So I provided this information to the staff specifically at McFarland High School, who helped me disperse this information to the students. And actually in the picture that I have posted on the slide, you'll see me in a session with one of our students. And so the students are able to pop into my office hours at any point in time during that time and chat with me regarding registration issues. Maybe they're having issues with one of the classes and they need additional support, and I need to outreach to get them that support. And so those office hours are directed for students, and they can happen in both a one-on-one session or a group session with the students. The other thing that we have been providing are Zoom student workshops. So the students have signed in. We had a mass registration event for our matriculating seniors, where they were able to come into these Zoom workshops and get assistance from Bakersfield College staff so that they were able to successfully enroll in the courses for their fall 2020 term. In addition, we provide email support. I created a Google Voice and text number, and I have support from student workers. So we have a great staff at Bakersfield College. We created how-to emails for students a lot because some students don't have access to the technological support like Zoom. And so we want to make sure that these students are supported. So we created how-to emails that we will send with pictures depicting how to register for classes, how to complete the BC application, how to update for the following term. And so this way our students can continue to get the information needed for successful matriculation. We also have student outreach where I would typically go into the high school classrooms to provide that support for students and presentations and helping them with the applications. I am now doing a outreach to students where we are calling one by one all of the students at McFarland in particular to help them enroll for their next term. And then again, we have to have a solid team. And so we have consistent communication with the high school staff and Bakersfield staff, ensuring that their needs are met. And it's not perfect, but it's something that we're trying to develop to give students, like our president said, the off-ramps needed to continued support and success in their pathways. And so with that, I am going to hand this over to Mr. Pelletier, who is one of our instructors at McFarland High School.
Hello, everybody. My name is Christopher Pelletier. I've been blessed to teach at McFarland Early College for 3 years now, and I'm currently teaching history over there for dual enrollment as well as English for the high school students. And just a few quick things about me that I think were relevant from my experience trying to do my best to provide the best possible service to my students. First of all, I come from a lot of experience with online college, seated college, colleges that were mixed where there'd be some classes physical, but then there'd be online components of them. And that gave me a lot to think about when it came time to provide dual enrollment instruction to my students. I also come from something of an impoverished background myself, and that is, I think, an important perspective to have, especially with our students being a lot of rural and socioeconomically challenged. They have difficulties that are more than just being at school and getting these very difficult classes accomplished. And you need to stop and think about what challenges those will throw their way and how we as the school, how myself as a deliverer of information and a facilitator can better meet them where they are. Also, from just kind of a personal note, I only took one AP class, but I also took one BC class when I was in high school. And those two classes, more than anything else I did in high school, prepared me for college. And I want to be able to give my students the same experiences so that when they do leave high school and they enter college and they're not just a dual enrollment student, but a just standard college student, they're ready to go more so than I was. And I think it all boils down to the first piece of advice I give anybody who's asked me about dual enrollment, and that's that college is not high school. High school talks a lot about preparing our students, making them college and career ready, and I think that's important because they're not college ready. There's a great big difference, and there's a cultural shock between those things, and I want to meet them where they are and get them to where we want them to go. So let's go on to the next slide, and which should be taking a look at the students we have here at McFarland Early College. We currently at our school have 958 students, with 85% of them socioeconomically disadvantaged. A lot of them are also coming from a linguistic background where they face challenges as that, as well as several students that are disabled. And for many of them that go to college, there's a decent chance that they will be the first in their family to do so. And this is why being part of the dual enrollment program at McFarland Early College is so exciting. Just getting to break molds and give opportunities. And I think what a lot of people don't appreciate about students that come from very challenging backgrounds is that it breeds a certain degree of independence and a type of maturity into them that has been thrilling to see in a lot of my students. Students that really do embrace the challenge and see dual enrollment as an opportunity to grow and achieve something great. Students that maybe aren't sure how to do things, but because they really want to tackle it, they'll communicate with me. I get emails every day from my students who are confused by one thing or another, but they've got the boldness to ask questions that students from other situations might not be willing to. A lot of them also appreciate that dual enrollment gives them kind of a jump start on college, especially from a financial perspective. I get questions all the time from students. Oh, Mr. Pelletier, how did you afford this? Mr. Pelletier, how did you afford that to get through college? And one of the things I like to highlight to them is how jealous I am of the opportunities early college and the dual enrollment program gives to them, that they can get a jump start on everybody else and not have to maybe dip into as much things like student loans that can be trying for a lot of other people. And the students really appreciate that opportunity. For a lot of them, that's the deciding factor, whether or not they want to take the challenge of those classes, is how much it will help them 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line financially. Not just in getting a better job, but in getting that better job without a debt around them. And so they appreciate all of this that goes to, because they come from that background in a way that some other people might not appreciate. If we could go to the next slide. So as far as the class I teach, I'm currently teaching History 17A and B, and it's essentially a U.S. history class. We've got numerous pathways at McFarland Early College. Specifically, this contributes toward a general education certificate and the possibility of an associate's degree. And those are the main, but we've got numerous other pathways that this helps our students for. And many of the students in this class are looking at those other pathways, whether or not they want to pursue careers in agricultural business, education. I have a number of students who are looking for going into teaching, which as a teacher is inspiring itself. Some of them are thrilled with the industrial technology aspects because they love the idea of welding, that hands-on, very physical type of career, and it excites them to the possibilities of being able to do that for a living. And what I'd like to tell them is, well, the history class doesn't contribute directly to that. It is still a college class. They're still getting the college credits for that. And say they go into welding and someday want to open their own welding shop. Well, they might want to get a business degree at that point to further their skills and as an entrepreneur. And a lot of the students realize, oh, yeah, I have to think not just 5 years down the line, but what if I want to expand later? And these other college classes help them, regardless of what pathway they're specifically on, to broaden their potential perspective and what they want to achieve. It gives them choices and options and lets them take control of their destiny in that way. As far as the other pathways, we are offering agricultural business, photography. We've got an excellent photography instructor. We're offering them courses in business, education, architecture and engineering, welding, and a public health pathway that a lot of students have been very excited about so far. If we could, thank you. Now, as far as myself as an instructor, a lot of the stuff we've done since the COVID transition are things I had already done and taken into account in. Like I said, I come from a lot of mixed background as far as what kind of classes I took, seated classes in college rooms, mixed classes where I'd be seated in some things, online for others, and purely online classes. My most recent degree was purely online. And I always, when I'm doing things for these dual enrollment students and even my other classes, ask myself, what did my professors do that I was glad that they did? And probably the most important thing was, you know, as they say, the most important thing in business is location, location, location. And I translate that in education to access, access, access. How can I make it so that these students can have access to this information, this instruction, this learning, regardless of where they are physically, mentally, economically. And we're blessed that our school, our administration has been a real champ about ensuring that our students can be one-to-one. Every student in our school has a Google Chromebook, as well as the fact at the beginning of each year, I take a survey to see what students have access to with other technology, even utilizing simple things like smartphones nowadays. I also want to tap into their passion for learning. I try to ask myself why students are taking this class. Are they taking the class I'm teaching because they're thrilled about history and it's their favorite subject? Or are they doing it to check off a box on a list of classes they need to take to get their goals? And there's benefits to both those perspectives. And some students are always shy about saying, well, I'm just taking this because I'll need it to get a degree someday. And I'm like, that's fine. Not everybody has to like everything. But I want to know that because I'm a big advocate of voice and choice. I think it's probably the most important practice any teacher can do. For example, in our class, is a historical research paper, pulling into primary source documents, annotating them, arguing with topics in history, but I don't choose the topic for them. They have to choose it for themselves. And for students that are truly passionate about some aspect of history, they get to really dig into something they've always been curious about, but maybe they haven't had time to, or an opportunity to dig in before because they were doing something else for a class. I'll always remember that my favorite books to read when I was in high school were the ones that the teacher let me pick, but I have only a passing memory and feelings toward the ones that were assigned to me. I want them to have that choice. Sure, I want them to know about certain things along the way of history, but if I'm really interested in their ability to do historical research, be guided, grow as learners, the specific topic, so long as it's an academic topic, is immaterial by comparison. So I want to give them that choice, that ability to express their own individual voice. I'm also a big advocate for complete course planning. Everything was assigned and everything had a due date before the class had even start, so that in some cases, students that know that they're going to have certain difficulties coming up with timing and scheduling can get ahead. And I have had several students taking advantage of that. I had one student that knew that they were going to have a medical issue, so she got several assignments knocked out ahead of time so that she could deal with that and not have to worry about this being done with recovery. And part of making that work is online access. At BC, Canvas is a big tool that's favored, and that's primarily where I deliver material to the students and they return stuff to me. But I also take advantage of Google Classroom. Every student is encouraged to have the Google Classroom app on their phone so that they get notifications. Another thing I do is I'm a big fan of open source material. OpenStax is the textbook we use for the classroom. And that's partially because it distributes as a PDF. There's no potentially complicated system. If they're doing their schoolwork at work, and I've had a few students do that. They've got jobs with their family at the weekend or in the afternoon, and they've done some of their schoolwork during that time, or at least caught up on reading during that time. I tell them, oh, here's the website with the OpenStax copy, the open source copy of your textbook. Download it there. And if there's other material, I'll put the link up so that they can put it on their phone. And while they're taking a lunch break at work, scroll through it and get that accomplished. Now, as far as COVID-19 affecting us, we've implemented a couple of changes. For one, I do continue with some lectures via the Loom app. Loom, if you're not familiar with it, is a wonderfully simple app. It's a Google Chrome extension that lets you record yourself as well as whatever's on your screen. So I've been delivering lectures with that, as well as regular office hours with Zoom that a lot of my students participate in. Some come in with some great questions. Some just want to check in and make sure that they're not missing anything. So that's a lot of the tools we use, Google Classroom there, Google Drive, just making it so that no matter what the student is doing, that they can access this material. Like I said, access. Works for real estate, it can work for education. Next slide. And here we have the perspective of one of our amazing students, Joshua Ariza.
Hello, everyone. My name is Josh Ariza. I'm a McFarland Early College junior. I was born and raised in McFarland. My past dual enrollment courses from from this program in successful online for dual enrollment. I plan on taking English B1 and English to be my senior year, and beyond that, I hope to maybe major in computer science in university in the future. And next slide. Yeah, like I said, my prior doing courses 611. Sorry. I made the first challenge myself
Joshua?
I've always
I
been
think.
in the mindset of
Hey, can you hear me, Josh?
high school. Because that's where
Hi,
I
Josh.
make mistakes for me as much as if I were in college. Also to expose myself to kind of college level material and to get myself accustomed to it, to condition myself to handle a harder work or a bigger work. Yeah. Yeah. I can't hear you. I don't know what's going on.
Oh, hey, Josh. Sorry, this is Amanda Issa helping with facilitating. We heard bits and pieces of what you're sharing, and I know it was like a lot of great stuff. So if you want, you can, I think your audio sounds a little bit better right now. But I think if you keep your video off, we'll be able to hear you more clearly. We're so sorry about that.
No problem. I apologize. Do I sound okay now?
Oh, so, okay. Sounds like our audio is still not coming in totally clearly. I do apologize for that, Joshua. It was really great to at least see you for a moment and to hear some of your thoughts. We're hoping that maybe we can somehow recast that another time and share it because I don't want to cut you off. It's really hard to hear. Someone's asking if you can call in, but I'm not too sure. How about we do this? If this works for the Bakersfield team, let's see if we can get Joshua on the line on the phone. Maybe that might help. Meanwhile, we'll just transition into some questions just to allow for a minute for you to get back on through a phone. Would that work for you, Josh?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, thank you so much for your patience, and I'll have the Bakersfield team help you get onto the phone. And so with that, I'm going to transition us into some questions. So the chat has been alive. A lot of things have been moving in the chat. Most questions that appeared have been answered, but I do want to make sure we have the time to review some of the questions that were answered and then pose a few new ones. And before I get started, if anyone on the Bakersfield team knows when Josh gets back on, can you please feel free to interrupt and let me know so we can hear a little bit more from him before we close up this section of the presentation. Thank you so much. So from our questions, there were some questions about how many students are enrolled as dual enrollment students. On one of the previous slides, the timeline to scale, the most recent number looked like nearly 8,000 students, so it was about 7,697. That's what I found from the slides. And if the Bakersfield team wants to add, please go ahead and let me know. There were questions about how they work with other colleges. And so in the chat, you'll see a lot of responses from Leslie and Kylie just about how they partner with their colleges. They're the colleges in the same area, and they're strategic about courses they offer at the high schools. They did share that they are fortunate to have 56 feeder high schools in Bakersfield to work with and strategize with each of those. Some questions came up about Cynthia's role as counselor. Just to clarify, and I will do a short clarification, then maybe Cynthia, if you want to add anything to it, more than welcome to, but that she is a Bakersfield counselor. She is at McFarland, I think it said 1 day a week, and that's been most of her role. I love that it says she's very busy, and I'm sure she's like, yes, I am. But Cynthia, if you want to go ahead and add a little bit more about what your role is, or you look like you might be busy, I can move on.
I actually have Joshua on the cell phone now.
Oh, okay. I figured that was happening. Okay, no problem. If you do want to hear more about that role, that is in the chat, so go ahead and check it out. And so what we did have a question on is, let's see, there was a question about the app that you use, Mr. Pelletier. And I just got to say, like, yes, using all those online resources are just so helpful for students to have embedded into the course before something like this should happen. So I can imagine that's been really helpful for your students. I did want to ask one quick question about a comment you made, Mr. Pelletier, earlier about how your exposure to college course as a high school student really set you, really prepared you for college in a way maybe your high school courses didn't. Is there maybe what is that one thing maybe, I don't know if it was one thing or more than one, that made the difference for you?
So the college course that I took when I was in high school, I'm a graduate of South High School in Bakersfield, go Rebels, was a geology class. And it was only a semester long, but unlike an AP class, which still felt like very much a college class, but with extra rigor, the instructor when I took that geology class intentionally made the effort to support us, but make us support ourselves first. You know, before she'd help us with anything, we were required to have made a greater effort ourselves to prove that we wanted to first. And every time any student questioned her on that was, well, you are a college student in this class. You need to get used to that habit. And we were never feeling like, you know, there wasn't a safety net under that tightrope, but we were made to feel a little bit like there is in fact a tightrope. And that may sound harsh, and but I don't mean it that way. Because when I got to college, it's not always easy to communicate with your professors. They have limited office hours. The class times are always so full. And to be successful in college does require a certain degree of independence. So I found that just that perspective of make sure you help yourself before you go looking for others to help you was probably the best thing I learned in high school to prepare me for college. And that BC geology class really drove it home more than anything else I took.
Thank you. I'm always curious to know. I feel like it's those little pieces that make a huge difference. I want to now take it back to Cynthia, who has Joshua on the line. We're going to try something real quick to see if it works. And if she's ready, she's going to hold the phone up to the speaker, and we'll see if it works. And if not, we'll continue with some questions. But Joshua, you're on.
My phone or my computer?
Your computer. Hi, everybody. Okay,
I can hear you.
If we can hear Joshua on the phone. Joshua, can you say hi?
Hello.
Hi, Josh.
She's saying hello, Josh.
Okay.
So if we want to go back to his slides, and then we can have him speak to his slides.
Okay.
Okay,
Joshua, you are on.
Okay, give me 1 second. Okay, there we go. Okay, hi everyone. I'm back. My name is Josh Ariza. I am a McFarland Early College Junior. I've been a resident of McFarland my whole life. And my past dual enrollment courses and experience with dual enrollment has really just been Success 101 prior to this course, prior to the history course, Mr. Pelletier. I plan on taking English B1A and English B1B in the future. And beyond that, I hope to major in computer science in university. And yeah, next slide. The main reason why I took this course when I was asked by my counselor was because I just wanted to challenge myself academically. Throughout high school, I've always been of the mindset to try and do as much as I possibly can in order to, not only rack up credits, which is obviously beneficial, but also to just expose myself to more and more and just become more familiar with how things work in the academic world and how to handle different workloads and different types of assignments. But yeah, also the gain of college credit was a big benefit that I saw because it just meant that I can get these college credits without having to pay for the course in the future, and that's really the main reason why, or it's one of the main reasons why I also took the course. By taking this course, it has helped me a lot. It taught me how to pace myself. Definitely, the workload of this course is much on a different level than my other courses, and I'm in 4 AP courses right now, and without a doubt, I can say that this is definitely the most challenging course. But because of that, it's taught me a lot. It's also taught me to how to strengthen my writing and researching just in general, but also just like to expose myself to how things will be in the future. It's also helped me broaden my perspective on the world in general. With the exemplary teachings of Mr. Pelletier, I've learned a lot, not only about history, but just like the overall how things are going to be in the future in college with this college course. It's also helped me prepare myself for my next level education course. By taking a college course, I've become much more accustomed to a larger scale of education.
Joshua, the next slide is the online learning.
Yeah, very perfect. Online learning. All work is done because of COVID-19 has been moved to online. Mainly my work has been assigned through Google Classroom and for the dual enrollment course through Canvas. It's definitely a huge change for me. It's completely changed how I approach my schooling. I learned, I've adapted in a way to become more independent and to kind of use my online resources that I have access to in the absence of a one-to-one interaction with my teachers, like I would in a classroom setting. Online lectures replace real-life ones and are one of the main sources of how I learn. It's helped a lot having teachers upload their own lectures online. And I overall think that the teachers have done a phenomenal job in adapting to changes and catering to us students in general. I know it's not easy for both teachers and students, and so I'm very appreciative of what our teachers have done and our counselors and everyone involved in the schooling to help us, succeed during these hard times. In terms of workload, I would say that it has remained the same, if not less, with the obvious change to online learning. I could see that our teachers understand that, not all of us are able to work in the most optimal setting if we're not in school. Working at home is definitely, I would say, harder because you're not in that mindset of, okay, I'm in school, let's work. You're at home, which has many distractions, family, and all that. So I would definitely say that my teachers have done a phenomenal job at helping us as much as possible and making sure that we aren't overworked, but also that we are, still doing what we have to do in order to learn the necessary material. So in general, this college course that I've taken with Mr. Pelletier has taught me how to manage heavy workloads. Of course, I think that's very important for me because prior to this course, I would say that, I wasn't as scholarly as I am now. I'm definitely much more used to handling bigger assignments. Like before, if I were to see a 7-page research paper that I have to do, I would completely freak out and not know what to do because that was completely alien to me before this course. But now, after going through the whole semester so far of this course, I'm currently in a semester right now, I'm definitely much more used to handling bigger assignments and being able to pace myself and assess, what do I need to do to get this done, and then doing it. Also, effectively researching topics and sifting through, all like the really fake news, especially in this era where fake news is rampant. It's definitely taught me how to find, academic sources and sources that are using proper citations and all that. So this course has definitely helped me not only with just knowing how to do certain schoolwork, but also in my general life is completely opened my eyes to many of what's going on in the world right now. Yeah.
Thank you, Joshua.
Oh, Joshua, thank you so much. I'm hearing you you say I'm scholarly, like that just is so heartwarming, and I'm really excited to hear from you. And thank you so much for sharing your experience with all of us today. It is always really a great reminder, or it's always really great to hear directly from students about the work that we're all trying to do in support of y'all. So thank you so much for taking time to share your experience. I just want to let everyone know that the slides, the recording, everything will be shared following the webinar. If you didn't register or you're not sure if we have your email, go ahead and drop it in the chat, and we'll make sure you get those resources too. So I just want to say thank you to our Bakersfield team. If you do still have questions, please let us know for Bakersfield. We are keeping track of things and hoping to provide you those answers. If you do check through the chat, you'll see a lot of questions and some answers to accompany them. And moving into our next set of presenters, I'm going to let the team from Chaffey College introduce themselves, the virtual campus, retaining a sense of belonging amidst COVID-19 transition. So Chaffey, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. And we're really excited to be here. So I'm going to introduce our team. My name is Matthew Morin. I'm the Director of Intersegmental Partnerships. It's an office that coordinates distance education, dual enrollment, and adult education. And I'm joined by Melissa Sakamfong, who is a counselor, but also the Guided Pathways faculty lead for the campus. And Roseanne Osmanian, who is the coordinator of the Success Centers. But she's also been doing quite a lot of work to create success teams for student support over the last year. And then Selene Pineda, who is a distance education faculty facilitator, as well as a librarian. So thank you so much. Before we get into what the college is doing with regard to COVID-19 transitions, I just want to take us back to January for a moment, because I think calibrating our lens to where we were as recently as 2 months ago, it can be a real startling way to engage our own consciousness about where we are right now. This was our Flex booklet for January. This whole year, the 1920 year, Chaffey College was really focused on creating a sense of belonging. That was sort of our college-wide mission for the year. And you can see the Flex booklet cover has a real focus on place, right? Welcome to Chaffey College. Here's the campus. All of our students are together. They're in close proximity to one another, right? It was a very different vision for the future and for how the college was supposed to be shaping itself with a guided pathways framework in mind, compared to where we are right now, where there's social distancing and the sense of belonging is not tied to place at all. We have to completely reconceptualize that. This sense of belonging really grew out of, just to give you a context, what I think a lot of your colleges are going through, which is you've focused first in the guided pathways framework on building your program maps. That was sort of the big heavy lift for faculty to create some alignment in their programs and to connect that to different touch points for students along the way, and then build that under a broader structure of meta majors. For us, we call our meta majors academic and career communities, and that's been a multi-year project, and we just wrapped that up last year. It'll continue in various iterations, but the big heavy lifting for creating meta majors and those program maps completed last year. Now this year we turned with a strong focus on entering and staying on the path, and that's why this creating a sense of belonging mission is kind of so important to that, because it's one thing once you clarify your pathways, but then in order to stay on those pathways, to enter those pathways, students need to feel part of a culture. They need to feel part of a college identity. And that's an uncharted space for much of the college. And then as we were moving into that space, creating success team models for student support, trying to align a lot of our matriculation steps and contact points for pre-enrolled students, the world fell on its axis, right? As it did for all of us. And all of our efforts that were space bound became untangled. Next slide, please. So it threw us into this space of like a kind of guided pathways risk assessment, right? We'd spent, like a lot of colleges, a lot of time creating these program maps so that students had clear curricular pathways to employment. That's the category on the left, right? On the right, SLOs had emerged, about 5 years ago with accreditation as a really important push. And colleges had really been forced to, in many ways, put ensuring that learning was on the front of their priority in the center of their view. And so there'd already been a lot of work in sort of calibrating learning and making sure that learning is something that we're really focusing on in a transparent fashion. But these two middle categories here for guided pathways, that helping students enter the path and stay on the path, they're really uncharted. They're really sort of untheorized from an institutional framework. From a student services framework, there's a lot of work that's been done to support students and to encourage retention. But across student services and student support, there hasn't been any sort of grand unifying theories, which when COVID-19 occurred, came to the surface for us. If you could switch to the next slide. So to kind of put this in perspective, I'm going to compare the instructional viewpoint, which is kind of like what we're looking at right here, which is that we're ensuring that learning is happening from an instructional perspective through this COVID-19 transition. And I'm going to compare that in the next slide to a student support framework where we're working on keeping students on the path and helping them enter the path, and how different these two different lenses are. So from an ensuring learning standpoint, this is the week before we went live for completely online. And to give you a perspective on scale, we had about 6,000 students out of our 30,000 student enrollment taking online classes. And then in the course of 2 weeks, like all of our colleges, we had to go completely online. And the week before, we had basically a ballistic training boot camp with hundreds of faculty going through training, actually over 1,000 faculty going through distance education training. And we had 2 weeks of training schedules that looked like this. And we were able to lift that up because there was a lot of alignment around distance education across divisions, and also theorizing what learning means in a distance education space from an instructional perspective. But moving a college online is more than just a classroom, right? And that's why kind of I have this warning sign down here of instruction is an incomplete measure of successful transition when we're talking about this COVID-19 transition, because when we looked at it from a student services or student support perspective, and if you could go to the next slide, we had nothing. There was virtually, in various pockets, there were trainings, there were different approaches that different divisions were using in student support. But in terms of a campus-wide institutional effort to lift a virtual campus up, looking at student supports, there really wasn't anything at all. So those two middle areas of guided pathways of entering the path and staying on the path for student support, that was very vulnerable in this COVID-19 environment. And a big reason for that, has a lot to do with the student engagement with how our student services and student supports are set up. This is a kind of neat conceptualization of what student supports look like on the campus for students. It's a series of discrete services that are very different. So unlike instruction, where a student can expect a similar kind of structure in every classroom that they go to, even though they're different disciplines, from a student support perspective, when they go to admissions and records or financial aid or counseling or tutoring or libraries, they're going to have, it's a totally different process, totally different structure, completely different experience. And as such, these different areas are much more disaggregated. They're much more misaligned, and there isn't a unifying sort of experience theory that the college could kind of rest on to lift up a 2-week process of turning all of these different areas virtual. If you could go to the next slide. So what we wanted to do is kind of change our thinking from a siloed structure when it comes to student support to an ecosystem structure. Because ecosystems, they have a lot of diversity, like student supports, right? There's a tremendous amount of diversity in ecosystems, but there's also mutual dependence, mutual reliance, and also they're holistic in their framework. Different parts make up the whole, and they can't live with all of those different individual components. You could go to the next slide. So one of our theories for creating an ecosystem structure out of student supports in a digital environment was to use a hub framework, a digital hub framework where we brought all student supports into one place for students, and also created that space under the umbrella of the LMS Canvas, and made it so that when students go to access their courses, they also would be able to access this student support ecosystem. And we started this in fall through a small grant, which was the CVC OEI Cte Grant. And that grant was really focused on small scale CTE, digital online instruction and student supports. But what ended up happening with COVID-19 is we had to scale that digital hub ecosystem really quickly to encompass the entire campus. And if you want to play that video just for a few minutes, it'll give you an idea of what this digital hub looks like.
Making connections, cultivating careers. That's the heart and soul of the Virtual Center for Career Pathways Initiative, Chaffey College's progressive plan to encompass online courses, resources, and support in a streamlined virtual hub that will benefit CTE students.
The idea is to build a campus virtually that matches the physical campus that we have. So when students are in their online classroom, they actually feel like they're part of a campus community that has all of the services that they would encounter if they were walking through our campus in person.
With funding from the Improving Online CTE Pathways Grant, Chaffey College went to work on implementing a multi-purpose, Canvas-based student support hub that would help students connect, collaborate, plan, and ultimately find employment.
There's a button in Canvas where they click and then it opens up the general hub. It's called the Career Pathways Hub. They can do tutoring. They can meet with the CTE counselor, and CTE counselors are embedded in courses now.
We're going to give it to them when they first enter the college. When you have access, when you have exposure, you're going to increase the odds of success. And that's what we're doing with the hub.
I wasn't sure what it was, so I clicked on it and it actually had like online counseling, tutoring, library, and I was like, wow, that's just crazy. That's awesome because I'm able to do those things at home and not worry about coming to the campus.
The hub will assist all Chaffey students, but it will provide special value.
So this was really small scale back in January, and immediately we had to make it much larger scale. And as that was occurring across different divisions, what was wonderful is there was a lot more cross-divisional work and urgency behind it. But what was missing was a digital doorway. So for all students, they didn't necessarily know how to access these types of resources once we built them. And then there were a lot of students at the gate, and by at the gate, I just mean this virtual gate of our college, whose voices couldn't be heard by the college and they couldn't get their questions answered. And some cross-divisional work with the library, who had a chat widget on their library webpage, resulted in the college putting a chat widget on our main page to the college website. And it's a real simple thing, right? Putting a live chat box on a main page. But what happened was kind of magical in a way, because what it allowed us to realize is there were literally thousands of students waiting to talk to somebody, and they couldn't get across the void because the college had shut down. And this chat box gave them a doorway to do that. And the very first week that we turned it on, we had around 600 chats. And then the next week we had another like close to 1,000 chats. By now, actually, this number is even outdated. It says 4,019 student chats. There's actually been over 5,000. I checked right before this presentation. So if you think about it, that's 5,000 students that needed to talk to somebody in this COVID-19 crisis. And this little window in the main page enabled them to reach out and do that. We created a kind of massive staffing structure behind it using a contingent workforce of tutors, library apprentices, and counseling apprentices, and as well as, led by the folks on this webinar. And it really opened up a special kind of space for those individuals in various divisions to communicate with each other to better understand the campus services so that they could help answer questions. I kind of liken it to the actual physical campus. When any staff member is walking on the campus and a student comes up to you and has a question, you're not going to turn them away because it's not your lane. You're going to answer that question. And that's what this chat box does. On the back end, you can see below, it says front page and Canvas chat. anybody who's staffing those chats, they can pull a question. They're able to grab that student and say, hey, you know, let me help you. And we're now sort of designing more protocols and more consistency around that. But it really was transformative for our campus in terms of giving a doorway to this digital ecosystem that we're trying to build. Next slide. So the other piece was helping students with all of the tools, right? A lot of our students hadn't been on Canvas before, like our faculty. They hadn't used Zoom or Cranium Cafe. And I think there needed to be, for them, well, our campus felt that there needed to be more than just a regular systems check, like check your microphone, some kind of automated support service. Instead, there needed to be a real person on the other line. That really needed to be a sense of community that we were building to encourage that sort of staying on the path ethos. And so what we did is we actually staffed the Zoom rooms so that they were live Zoom rooms. So when students came into the Zoom room to test their equipment, there was a real person there, other staff members saying, hey, you're in a Zoom room, you're right here, you're ready, let me help you, let me get you set up for your new online experience here at Chafee. And we had a ton of student feedback that they were really appreciative that there was actually somebody there on the other line. Next slide. The other thing we did, sort of leaning into this live human connection piece of the virtual campus, is we kind of repurposed financial aid and student services. You know, those long lines that exist in those student service buildings as students are trying to get their questions answered, admissions records and financial aid. Those are no fun, right? I think we can all agree on that. But there's no getting around the capacity issues where there's lots of students that need to get those services and there aren't enough staff to meet them. And so the college had created queue lists. I think most of our colleges have queue lists now for financial aid and admissions and records. And what that does is it helps to stagger the traffic and helps to enable students to know when a financial aid advisor or a counter person at admissions and records can meet with them. But QList, the company, had never done this for an online environment. And we kind of hacked in. We hired a contractor who's been working with us to create the student support hub. And we actually hacked into QList and changed all their queues to turn the physical queue into a virtual line. And then we put it on the main page of the website and said, as you can read here, it says admissions and records and the financial aid office are available to serve you online. Join our virtual line and someone will be with you shortly. When students click that, they type in their name and number, they receive a text message, but instead of that text message telling them when to go to the counter, it gives them a link to the Zoom room that they can go to, as well as a phone number that they can call if they don't have access to internet. There's me with a silly looking look on my face, as well as the Rockstar Admissions and Records staff who staff that environment. And as you can see, it's a real community environment in there as well. It actually did as much for the staff as it did for the students. We've heard from staff that it's done a lot to build community amongst them because it's broken down space as the element for them to be able to communicate with each other. It's created like, you know, Google's open office space. It's like done that in a virtual environment. Because now when they have questions, they can talk to each other. They don't need to shout across a divide or walk across the office. They can just pop in and ask those questions of each other. When students click on that Zoom link, they enter into a waiting room in the Zoom room, and then the host will put them into a breakout room with a financial aid or admissions record specialist to work with them personally. Next slide. So I'm going to kick this off to our star librarian, Selene Pineda, who has done the lion's share of the work on the Student Support Hub portal for the online library. Selene?
Thank you, Matt. Hi, everyone. Thanks for inviting me to this presentation. So as you can see, this is a picture of what the online library looks in the Student Support Hub. And actually, we were probably one of the first people of the area and at Chafee that we started working on this. So we created this page using LibGuides, which is one of the tools that we use for at the library, and it was embedded in the Student Support Hub. prior to COVID, we were already had this lounge, and we want also to keep it a sense of belonging and also in a way kind of replicate what they want the in-person experience, but obviously on the online environment. So when students would click on the online library, they would see the find books, so they can actually find books there, electronic books. The one thing that it was very part of the funding that we had as the blue box that you see says chat with a librarian 24/7, that was acquired by Question Point. And basically this one was probably the selling point for pretty much our services, because even though we have our hours that would finish probably at 8 o'clock, and then Saturday, we were able to have the students still connect to a librarian 24/7, whether it was at midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning. And basically, what happens is that this Question Point, I will be an expert librarian that will answer questions to whatever the students might have. And it starts, if you're, it starts from the Chafee librarians during office, during working hours, and then also we go to other colleges librarians that also in the same consumption of this chat. So it's actually pretty good. Also, I wanted to show you, there was this meet with the librarian, and we have online workshops alongside with coordinating with the success centers and other resources that research and FAQs and research guides that we created prior to this. So I just wanted to give you a way how it looks like, and also the tools on the left that we used in order to make this happen. And if you can see on the next slide, the meet with the librarian is basically we're using the Cranium Gaffer card, and this is another picture. I didn't put all of the librarians there, but you can see the students when they click on that, they can see a friendly face and then the information from the librarian, so they can actually, even if they're offline, they can send in a message or schedule an appointment with the librarian on a specific day and time. And they can click on the Ask Me or knock on the door button there. So just kind of humanizes that. And I want to show you the next slide as well. Really quickly, because I know we're on time here. Actually, way before we started doing the Student Support Hub, we already had library embedded services within Canvas courses. And I put Annette there. Annette Young is one of our librarians that kind of started the online embedded library services in Canvas, I think at the beginning of 2016. And when I came in, we kind of created this Poe the Panther librarian as a kind of a mascot for the library. So basically the discussion topics that are there listed, like Poe, picking a topic, all these topics were in the discussion boards within the specific course. And the professors would ask for us to be embedded in their classes. So Poe, the Panther librarian, we had to create a profile. We post all these discussion topics, and the students will answer directly from the post, and Poe will answer. And basically, Poe, it's Annette, me, and other team of librarians that we work together to support these discussion topics and answer specific questions about research within the class. So this doesn't have to go outside their class. And we also do some assessments as well. Every time we do a post, we kind of say, was this post helpful? And whether they click yes or no, we will actually put a little short 2-question survey. And we also have tutorials there within this post that they can actually take in embedded in Canvas. And again, that doesn't come out of the Canvas interface. So the students can do everything within their course. One of the things that was really, that we look into when we were doing is the accessibility, because everything that we have posted, not just here on Canvas with Poe, we want to make sure that everything that it was created there is accessible. So we coordinate a lot with our DPS department. And also, once based on this embedded librarian in Canvas, that helped us to actually kick off the to accommodate the rest of the things on the online library that we have in the student support hub. And of course, we wanted to use Pope the Panther Librarian as like a kind of an encouraging or a friendly mascot for everybody to recognize. And we have students in the asking, oh, where is Pope? Hi, thank you, Pope, for answering my research question and so on. So I'll leave it to now because I know we have more people coming, but if you have any questions, then let me know. Thank you.
Cool. I'll go ahead and start. Hi, I'm Roseanne Osmanian, and you know, the COVID-19 pandemic has been a catalyst for a lot of innovation as well as development of things that we had started in our success centers as well as our SI program and our new embedded tutoring program called PALS, which stands for Personal Assistant for Learning. So prior to the outbreak, we had about about 8 different success centers. This is where we offer our tutoring services across 5 different campuses, including our 2 programs in the women's and men's prison in Chino. And so we have about 260 apprentice tutors. Apprentice is just the word we use to classify them. They're hourly classified employees, as well as our front desk student workers. And then we also have about 100 instructors who work part-time in our success centers. So prior to the pandemic, we were starting to offer some asynchronous tutoring. We were doing that through Canvas, and we also had some synchronous tutoring that was starting to happen. In addition, in terms of our guided pathways planning, we were starting to develop our centers around our academic and career communities, which we're going to have a soft launch in the summer. But as of March 13th, it happened to be a Friday the 13th when our spring break started, all of that rapidly changed. And so kind of like Matt said, we mobilized for a couple of days to sort of build out our programs on our Canvas platform. And then we pretty much trained about 300 tutors and instructors in the course of about 1 day to get them ready to serve students primarily in those LibChat and Zoom exploration rooms. We did that for about a week, the week of March 23rd, and then the week of March 30th, that's when we reopened our success centers online, as well as our SI and our PAL program services online. Now, the beautiful thing about that week of March 23rd was after we trained the tutors and the faculty and the front desk folks, we put them, some folks asked me in the chat, we put them in the LibChat to answer students' questions, as well as in the Zoom exploration room. And this was kind of like magical, because this is where they not only helped students, but they themselves were learning the tools that they were going to use when they got into those virtual spaces the following week. So that was really cool. And what we noticed was that, even though we did 1 day of training, we couldn't just like leave people in there and, just kind of assume that they were going to be okay on their own. Their confidence as tutors and as faculty really relied on the full-time faculty to kind of be behind the scenes supporting them. So I kind of think that's a really interesting thing, is that we often rely on technology to automate a lot of stuff, but it still takes like a lot of people power to kind of make those transitions into that virtual space really work. So the slide that you're looking at right now is basically the Canvas virtual success center that we created that's linked to our DE hub that Matt had showed you. And if we could go to the next slide. As I mentioned earlier, you know, we were already considering how we were going to realign our success centers with the academic and career communities. Before that, we had some loosely like subject-specific tutoring centers that existed, as well as multidisciplinary success centers that existed in Chino and at our Fontana campuses. Our largest campus is the Rancho Cucamonga campus. But now in this post-COVID-19 world, those physical locations were irrelevant. So it actually forced us to create these subject-specific domains, and probably coming this summer, we'll realign them even more closely to our academic and career communities. So we consolidated all of our faculty and staff from the Chino and Fontana locations and brought them into these more subject-specific spaces. So here's an example of the English Reading and Writing Virtual Success Center that we created. Okay, can we get the next slide, please? So once they kind of go through that main entry point, there are links to where our services are occurring. Students can access our synchronous tutoring services directly in our Zoom room. So that picture in the middle, you can kind of see me in there. We've asked our tutors to kind of rename themselves, so when a student does come in, they can see who the intake or front desk person is versus the instructor or the tutor. And then on the left-hand side, you can kind of see our breakout rooms. So we created these individual breakout rooms for each student, renamed them. So when a student comes in, there's a little bit of kind of an onboarding process. We do have students fill out a little survey prior to getting into the room. So we kind of know what they're in there for. And it also helps us collect some data on students, which I'll talk about in just a minute. And then once we know what they're here for, then we go ahead and assign them to a tutor. The other way students can access our Zoom rooms, in addition to that Canvas site that we created, is through our WC Online appointment system. I know a lot of tutoring centers already use that. They would make an appointment with a tutor for a particular subject, and then once they make that appointment successfully, they get a link to the Zoom room, and then that's how they access our services there. So I think, you know, kind of hearkening back to what Josh had said earlier, you know, in terms of living in this online world, you know, it's difficult to sometimes focus because you're so distracted by a lot of things. And I think that's what we're hearing from students is you know, they like having sort of that live person. That's what kind of keeps them like learning, right? Because so many of them told us that they went to campus so that they could go somewhere that was distraction free or that was safe for them. And having tutors available or having SI leaders available through this platform has kind of helped them focus, sometimes in a space that isn't as supportive for them, you know, due to the circumstances that we're in. Can we get the next slide, please? So in terms of reporting data, we use the library's Lib app products, one of them being LibWizard, which where you can create surveys and forms. And so I had mentioned that prior to a student entering our Zoom room, they would fill out this sign-in sheet that you see here on the left, where they would indicate, you know, the class that they're here for, as well as the activity that they want to do in the Zoom room. And then on the right-hand side, that's an example of one of our tutor slips that we digitized.
And so a tutor would open that up at the beginning of the session, put the start time in and put the end time in. And then now we have this database of information that we are on the back end. We have remote access to our positive attendance system. And so our full-time classified staff are remotely accessing positive attendance and then inputting that data so that we can report it to the state for apportionment purposes. We also utilize the Zoom reports. So that's what that little thing is on the bottom there, is you can actually get a report that shows like when a student logged into Zoom and logged out of Zoom. So that's pretty much it for me. I think I've really enjoyed just kind of hearing what students are saying to us about these services. They're thanking us that there's a live person that they can chat with. We also heard from students who said they might have dropped their classes if it weren't for their SI leader who was, you know, reaching out to them and meeting with them, you know, each week since we've started our services. So we know that students are really staying on the path because of these particular student support services, immediately going online and reaching out to students as soon as possible. Thanks.
Thank you, Roseanne. I'm just going to quickly post a quote from one of our classified staff to Roseanne's point as well, who's been working in the A&R Zoom room. I just asked her to speak a little bit about her experience and shoot me an email. And so that was a quote from her about what the students are sort of experiencing when they're in those rooms, which tells us a lot that like virtual does not need to be disconnected, right? Like students don't need to feel like they're not part of a community just because we're online. Another important piece to remember is as we describe each one of these discrete areas, just bringing us back to the hub concept, all of this is housed in one place, but has multiple doorways to it throughout the campus, throughout like the virtual campus. So we're really sort of trying to make it so that students feel like there's a one-stop shop for everything that they need, and then they run into that in all sorts of places so that they don't have to dig around in a website to find it or walk around the campus with a map trying to figure out where they're going. This is our online virtual counseling portion of the hub, and this is when the counselors started building this in the online hub. There were really only 4 or 5 counselors for each area that had Cranium Cafe cards. Cranium Cafe is the tool that they use. And it definitely wasn't scaled. It was very marginal. All appointments were actually made in one way or another through classified staff using SARS and phone calls, even if they were online appointments. And then overnight, every counselor had a Cranium card over the last couple of weeks, and the counseling area built out a much more robust structure for their online counseling support hub area. And this is really due largely in part to the work of Melissa and some of her partners in counseling. And as you can see previously, you know, where a student had to call in or go to the desk of a program assistant to make an appointment with a counselor, now they can schedule their own appointment online. If you could go to the next slide. And when they click schedule an appointment, this is the screen that they see, and they can choose what day, what time, and which counselor they'd like to meet with. As well as indicate what they'd like to meet about. And that counselor, on their end, they have a schedule in Cranium Cafe that is indicated with open time where students can make those appointments. So it really streamlines the counseling appointment scheduling piece in a way that, you know, I hate to say it, but kind of SARS never really allowed us to do, because it wasn't well integrated with all of the webcam and technology pieces that are needed for virtual counseling meetings. And the other great piece is that all the data that's pulled out of like these little boxes here, as well as information that counselors indicate in reason codes, can be utilized for for your MIS reporting as well. So it's really well integrated. You can code it in the same way that you can with SARS. Here's a picture on the left of one of our adjunct counselors, Nicole, doing a counseling meeting through Cranium Cafe. So you can see they meet over webcam, they can exchange documents, and the counseling area converted all of their documents to digital documents when they were previously all paper. So that's another huge accomplishment. And then those can be stored in Cranium Cafe for easy access. Next slide. The other sort of piece that we've built out quite a bit is this Career Pathways and Transfer Hub. And this is the sort of at the end of the path, right, where students are going, either they're transferring or going into a career. We also utilize Cranium Cafe for that. And you can see that there's a box like with the counseling area that says chat with the transfer center now. And when students click on that box, they enter into a waiting room in Cranium Cafe, where they can chat with either a classified staff member or someone else who's staffing that. And then they can be pushed into an open meeting if there's somebody who has some open time to meet with them, or they can be helped to schedule an appointment at a later time. So there's a lot of work that we're doing in this space as well. I'm not going to go do too much of a deep dive on it, but it actually originally was the primary focus of the grant. And the student support button in that hub was like considered to be our long-term sustainability plan, and the whole thing flipped. It turned out that the student support hub became the virtual campus, and now the Career Pathways and Transfer Center hub is just a piece of that. So thank you. Next slide. The other piece of all this, and I think Josh really kind of brought that to our attention as well, is that hardware matters. Access to broadband internet, laptops, our students, largely our first generation, and we know, like, there was a survey that was done in our Fontana district, that showed that around 40% of our students didn't have access, of the high school students and college students didn't have access to high-speed broadband internet or laptop computers. And what that means is there's no access to information or education in this online environment. So the college scaled up a real remarkable loan program by purchasing actually 6,000 laptops. This article is undershooting it. And we did that through the governing board, basically created an emergency relief fund, like many of your governing boards, of $1 million to allow the college to do a lot that it was never able to do before, like scale up a hardware loan program super fast. And I think this inequity of access to hardware and internet brings to the surface a lot of inequities that were already there, but it forces us to confront them. I think in the past, we were able to say, well, a student can always come to campus, or a student can always meet with somebody or get access to Wi-Fi on the campus. And we could kind of look the other way to these inequities, but COVID-19 forces us to look at them right in the face. And I'm hoping that hardware loan and broadband internet access for all becomes a major priority for the college system, for the state, for the country, for the world, because it really is a necessity in order to create equal access to education. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to our Guided Pathways faculty lead, who's responsible for so much of this work, but stays in the background because that's her steez. But I'm going to let her speak a little bit about what we're talking about in the future, which is really uncharted territory.
So what everybody's kind of just been talking about is really kind of just the technical training, all of the things that we really needed to kind of scale all of these support areas. But what it also surfaced was there wasn't really anything formally in terms of a certification that kind of mirrored what instructional faculty were doing. And you can kind of see that in some of the illustrations that Matt kind of went over earlier. And so then we started thinking about what would that mean for support areas, and what would that certification look like, because we were already doing that work, but nothing has really been formalized. And so then we started just posing these wondering questions. What would that look like? like? What would that cover? Where are the parallels? And so these were some of the things that we're kind of just brainstorming right now. We actually have a meeting right after this. And we're thinking about like proficiency standards. What are the technical things that we all need to have, we all need to cover, that are similar to instruction, that are similar to all the areas that we support, but that are also different. And then we're also looking at pedagogy, as well as some of these other things that Matt considers super exciting, like really just what does learning look like in these environments? How can we standardize some of these things? If we're in a counseling session with a student, what are some of the things that students can get out of our session that is standardized across all of our sessions? And so those are the things that we're kind of exploring right now, and we're going to take a deeper dive within this next semester. And it kind of works out really well just because we've always wanted to explore some of these things, and me being the Guided Pathways leads for kind of all of student support here at Chaffey College. Some of the things that, you know, has always been at the forefront of my mind, but it's never been something that I've been able to kind of really focus on wholeheartedly, just because I've had all of these other things to kind of look at. But with this COVID-19, it opens a different door for us. And so it's really been exciting. And I'm hoping that there's something amazing that comes out of this, and we can share later what that looks like.
I would also add that this slide really is pushing it to you guys who are on this webinar. I haven't really heard of something that cuts across all student support divisions in terms of theorizing what does proficiency in an online environment look like. Whereas in the online classroom, that's been like, you know, a multi-decade long process. And so we really want to know from the participants in this webinar, what ideas do you have? What does this look like? You know, it's just sort of a fascinating piece that I think we'll have to lean into over the next several years. So that's our presentation.
Thank you, team from Chaffey. Thank you so much. We do have quite a few questions. I know that a lot of questions have been answered in the chat, but I thought maybe we could maybe briefly just touch on them so we can share with everyone. And so my first, and there's a little comment there that in regards to what Matt was just saying, if you have ideas, please do share them, put them in the chat, and we will help track that. But just to clarify a few things that were already, again, answered in the chat, could we, maybe Roseanne, maybe you could help us just to re-explain what is a supplemental or SI, and then the apprentice tutor. What are those two positions?
Sure, definitely. So supplemental instruction, I believe, is kind of a nationwide approach to collaborative learning. So the SI leader is someone who has been successful in the course and was identified by an instructor as someone who would be able to help students with the course. And so instructors at Chaffey can let our SI program coordinator know that they would like to have an SI leader in their class. This particular leader is then assigned to the class. They go to class with students, so they know intimately what the assignments are about. And then what they do is they create lesson plans each week to host a collaborative learning session either before or after class, maybe once or twice a week. And it really is a unique kind of service or support service that differs from tutoring, right? Tutoring is that kind of one-on-one, sort of very customized, individualized experience, whereas SI really capitalizes on like the collaborative, you know, nature of small group learning, and designs the activities around what is actually happening in the course. So I believe like the national sort of like headquarters is located at the University of Kansas. So you can actually go onto Google and just type in, I think, University of Kansas SI. There's probably people in this webinar that know more about it than I do. Yeah, it's a really, really neat student support program.
Awesome.
And
thank
then,
you so much.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, please. Yeah, thank you.
Apprentices, that's just the classification that we give to our hourly classified employees who are our tutors. They could be someone who has a bachelor's degree or someone who's working on their bachelor's degree. We hire tutors at kind of 2 different apprentice levels, so their pay rates differ. But essentially the idea is that we are apprenticing them through employment at the college for a future job or career. So that apprenticeship is a maximum of 3 years at the college, and they serve either in a success center or in our embedded tutoring or as an SI leader.
Awesome. Thank you for that, for clarifying. And again, there was another question around one of the roles, and I think, Matt, you responded to that in the chat. And so if you could maybe just share again, the role of the, let me get the right, counseling apprentices. You mentioned that earlier. If you could just kind of quickly review that for folks.
Sure, I can do a kind of hack job. I think, Melissa, you're probably better equipped.
So the success guides are in a similar role. They're in the apprentice role. So just like what Roseanne described, they're in that they have a time frame of 3 years or a maximum of 900 hours, whichever comes first. And they are graduate students in programs looking to become counselors themselves. And so then they get that training. They go through several weeks of training, and then they get that on-the-job training as well once they're on campus. Well, now virtually.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We have some other questions. I know that it has been explained about how students can use, how they can access tutoring, and that you went through the QLESS platform, and in depth you kind of went over like the different pieces of communication that come through it. Do you mind maybe sharing like a really Cliff Notes version of like, if say I'm a student who wants to get tutoring, where do I start? And what's like the steps that happen throughout that?
We haven't embedded the QLESS system into tutoring yet, but that's what we are going to do this summer to help, you know, manage those wait lists for workshops and tutoring. But essentially, if a student wants to access a tutor, they go through the student support hub that Matt showed them, and then in one click, they will get over to the Canvas Virtual Success Center site where they can enter into a Zoom session, or if they make an advanced appointment, they'll get a link to the Zoom session where the tutors are at.
Can I also just add that like the PAL structure, so in terms of like doorways and access, right? What Roseanne just described is the way a student could self-select themselves into a tutoring appointment by entering the virtual door, but also they've embedded tutors in classrooms in the virtual Canvas shells, so that students, so that there's like a, what's the word? High, like intrusive advising approach to students, so that they don't have to find it. They're met with the tutor directly.
Okay. And so then just to clarify for folks, we have a few questions here. And I see, Matt, you put it in the chat box. You said that the QLESS is for A&R and financial aid, right? Okay. And to clarify, does the counseling access for that, does that fit within this, or is that on a different platform? Is that with tutoring?
No, so counseling is also within the student support hub, and what we utilize in the back end is Cranium Cafe. And so what Roseanne described in terms of that week where we made that transition, we spent all of that time building out the infrastructure of all the different areas, as well as putting people in the places that they belonged, creating the virtual cards, making the transition where students can schedule their own appointments. And we all did that within Cranium Cafe, as well as utilizing their lobby feature. And so they're mimicking what it would look like on a walk-in, but using that virtual lobby. And so we've kind of worked out process and protocols and all of that. And we kind of started that work a little bit before all of this happened, but we fleshed out more of it within that week.
I also just want to add that there were specific design principles, right, that were really intentional about using these different tools. It wasn't like we were just grabbing for whatever was available. With regard to QLIS, linking to Zoom, that was really ideal for prospective students who didn't have an ID, who never, engaged with the college. Maybe they hadn't even done an application before, because there's no gates for that, as well as the chat box. But for Cranium Cafe, there's authentication. When they're meeting with student counselors to do an ed plan, largely they are already a student. So there's and then Cranium scheduling capacity is really built out for counseling specifically.
Yeah, so within Cranium, we literally mirrored our entire workflow online. We've created intake forms for students to fill out so that when they book their appointments, all that automation happens. We get the information we need in order to prep for the appointments. At the very end, there's a survey that they take. The feedback's been pretty amazing. Students love what they've been able to experience within Cranium Cafe. Simultaneously, we built a Canvas course that is really technically a repository for all of our information that we need for our counseling session. It includes all of our forms, process within the specific areas, all the things that we would need for our counseling session is also in Canvas.
Thank you. Thank you for explaining all that and sharing. And we have there, you mentioned earlier that in your chats you have, as of this morning, about 5,000 students who've or chats that have come up. Are there other metrics that show that your online community is really thriving and supporting folks? I know you mentioned the quote that you shared in the chat. Folks, if you haven't seen it, do scroll through the chat to see that quote. But are there other metrics that help to identify that this is working for people?
So the main metric that we've been using is just sheer numbers and then anecdotal quotes that we're getting, like feedback from students. This group hasn't been sleeping much lately, so I think next what we're really interested in doing is that more outcomes-based assessment that you're talking about, where we can really see, wow, what is the impact for students who utilize these services that compared to those who don't, and I think there's a real opportunity to do that in the services that are offered through authentication in the Student Support Hub area through Canvas. It's harder to track that for students who are prospective students because we don't have their identifying information right off the bat. I also just wanted to say that the Student Support Hub before the pandemic, never had more than a few hundred clicks a day, and the Friday before instruction began completely online on March 30th, there were 9,500 clicks on that Student Support Hub in one day.
That is quite a jump. Oh my goodness. We do have a lot of questions and comments regarding like how can we learn more about this hub and a digital toolkit and that sort of thing, and how can we contact you. Matthew's put his email in the chat box. So I guess Matthew's saying bring on the emails. The Chafee team loves to share, and I think Matt, maybe you had something you wanted to add there, or I saw you unmute.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I can route you to the different like the Student Support Hub. It's an ecosystem, right? So I can route you to the different environments in that ecosystem, the different animals who have been working in different places. For right now, at least, we have sort of been doing it under the umbrella of the CVC OEI grant, which is the grant that our area is focused with. So feel free to email me, and if I don't get back to you right away, just email me again, like 100 times.
Oh man, well, thank you, the Chafee team. Thank you so much for just sharing all the different tools you've developed and and managing. It does sound like quite a lot of work, and I do hope you get to sleep. But I just want to thank you guys, thank the Bakersfield team, thank everyone who's joined us today. That kind of wraps up our webinar. We have just one more thing to share with you all. This is part of a series, and so our next webinar will be on Friday, May 1st, the same time, same theme, redesigning with transitions in mind. We will be hearing from the Long Beach Partnership, as well as system impacted programs, so Rising Scholars, an organization from Shasta College and Southwestern College. So we do have a little mix of colleges and groups sharing with you all on Friday, May 1st. If you're interested in joining, we will be sending out an announcement to the RSVP list from today's event. If you're not sure if you're on that, please go ahead and put your email in the chat and we will track that for you. We hope that you'll be able to join us again for that webinar. And with that, I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for joining us on your Friday morning. Thank you to our teams from Chafee and Bakersfield. Like, incredible stuff. The field is just so excited to hear what you have to share. And thank you to all of the CLP team behind the scenes and in the front trying to get things done and rolling amidst everything going on. So with that, the resources, everything, the recording will be shared with you all via email and on our CLP website following this webinar. You get 4 minutes of life back. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll leave the chat open if you'd like to drop your email or just say hi to folks. And that's it. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.